joining us right now, CNBC senior contributor and host of the Larry Kudlow Show right here on WMAL Saturdays at 7 p.m., the one and only Larry Kudlow. Hi, Larry.
Good morning. Good morning.
So a big political earthquake, they're calling it, over in Europe. The EU elections took place over the weekend, and it looked like more libertarians, more anti-EU factions won, both in the UK and in France. Is this going to change the European Union in a significant way? Could it affect the euro? What's going on?
I doubt it. I doubt it very much. I mean, they did pick up some votes in a couple of countries, as you noted, but I don't think it was widespread. I don't think the totals were large enough. It may give some pause to EU leaders about spending money, for example, on bailouts, but no, it won't. I don't think it'll affect the euro. And, you know, I've seen these things before. Individual countries have revolts. In fact, in some years where they've actually been defeated on the ballot, they've actually defeated some EU propositions on the ballot. So what is the EU? It goes back and takes 6 more weeks and votes again and wins. So I just don't see any major changes here.
I want to turn to the VA problem that the Obama administration has right now. There seems to be a movement toward doing some kind of private sector solution here. In other words, if you can't get the kind of service that you need at the VA, then, you know, you could go to a private hospital and perhaps get care. Not real clear on the details of how that would work. But a lot of people are saying this is the solution. Let's turn to the private sector and see if we can solve this problem.
Well, I'm one of those people, and I wrote a column about this. I mean, I think the classic generic point here is that a totally government-run single-payer system, which is a socialist system, they run everything. They run the hospitals, they run the doctors, they run the facilities. Doesn't work. There's no private sector profit incentive to allocate resources properly to bring doctors back in. And until they change that, throwing more money at the problem is not going to help. And the bureaucracy has its own self-interest. They make arbitrary decisions about what you can and cannot get. And so, yeah, you're in this fix now where long waiting lines, just like in Europe, damage the health of the veterans, and in some cases, apparently, tragically, have actually killed them. So, yeah, there's some talk about using private hospitals. Now, this has always been an option. This has always been an option, but it's never been used properly. It's been used in some cases, okay, some parts of the country, but basically has not been used overall and has not been used in size, you know, in bulk size. And I think that you're going to have to go further than that. You're just going to have to put in some kind of consumer choice for private sector health care plans, veterans' choice for private sector health care plans, even going to the extent where the government subsidies go directly to the individual veterans, who will then have a choice. They can go out and choose whatever plan they like, which might be, by the way, Obamacare exchanges. It might be non-Obamacare exchanges. It'll probably be individual insurance plans. But having said all that, I mean, that's my area. That's my point of view, that you should put some private competition. I don't see it. I'm reading this morning's paper. Veterans are firing back at Senator Richard Burr, who's putting it on the line. Senator Bernie Sanders wants to spend more and more. You know, spending has tripled in the last, 10 or 12 years. Spending has tripled, and we still can't
solve the problem now. Yeah.
Hey, and so the question is, are we going to haggle over this? I mean, the VFW has opposed any sort of privatization efforts down through the years. And I think that's been so damaging to the veterans. They want this government-driven program, and look what's happened to it. It's like Canada. It's like Britain. It's like some of the European countries. So I'm not so sure about this. I'd like to see more privatization. I'd like to see vouchers. I'd like to see veterans' choice. You think you're going to get that kind of reform? I don't know. Well, I just don't know.
And the VFW, they wield a lot of influence in this town. I mean, is their opposition to privatization standing in the way here and keeping politicians, Republicans and Democrats, from moving down that road because they're afraid of backlash from a very powerful and influential group?
Always has been. They've always been a barrier. And this is not, by the way, really a partisan issue. because Republicans have basically given the VFW the increased spending year in and year out that the VFW wants. And so you're building on this gigantic government-run bureaucracy, which is highly inefficient and can't make choices. I mean, without some pricing decision, without some profit decision, you're in rationing. You're in rationing. And when you ration, you're not meeting the market needs. And so you get these long lines, these long waiting lines with their tragic consequences. So, yeah, are you going to put some freedom in the veterans' health system? I'd sure like to see it.
Yeah.
But so far, the VFW, I mean, I'm just reading in the New York Times this morning, the VFW is going up against Senator Richard Burr, who, along with Senator Coburn and Senator McCain, I believe that's the first time for John McCain, maybe I'm wrong there, who are actively talking about free choice, market-oriented private sector reforms. And they're blasting Burr for this. And Bernie Sanders, the great socialist that he is, who runs the Veterans Committee in the Senate, wants more money, More money is not going to be the answer, and there's a warning here. Single-payer insurance doesn't work. Government-run health care doesn't work. So therefore, shouldn't we apply this lesson to Obamacare writ large? Obamacare is not there yet. There are still some choices in Obamacare, but those choices are shrinking. So there's an example, a warning, that this is going to attack the entire healthcare system.
There's been a lot of talk over the weekend about an IRS ruling that will prevent employers from dumping workers into the health exchanges. Can you help us have a little clarification on what this story's about?
Well, I'd like to try. You know, it's funny. I've been corresponding with some distinguished healthcare experts. I'm not sure precisely what this means because, look, these employer plans are going to have greater costs. All right, the mandates are going to cause the prices to go up, including, by the way, expanding the cost of employee dependents. That's just one thing of many. So are these companies going to have to eat those costs because the IRS is saying you can't deduct them if you give them to your workers? That's been the tradition. They're deductible. What does this mean, for example, if you have a Walgreens situation where Walgreens has opted not to force Obamacare exchanges, but they're giving a lump sum to their employees who will then match the lump sum and then have the right to take this. It's like a 401k for health choice, for health care. They have the right to take that 401k and shop around both the public exchanges and the private exchanges. It's not clear whether that's going to be allowed or not. I looked at this initially as a very anti-business move. Okay, that's sort of the way I see it. Obama is worried that premiums are going to rise a lot. And I think that's a correct worry because they've added on these mandate costs. Therefore, he's trying to shut down the ability of businesses to compensate for that, either by using his exchanges or these 401ks. And I think this is an anti-business move, and I think that Team Obama doesn't want to be embarrassed by high premiums and that they have to pay the burden of the high premiums, which means they might at some point have to bail out the insurance companies, these corridor bailouts, all of which will be enormously unpopular politically around the country. So I don't know. I take this Robert Pear's article. Robert Pear is a very good healthcare reporter down through the years. There's still a lot of questions here how this is going to work, if it's going to work at all.
All right, Larry Kudlow.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks a lot, Larry.